So we're going to go through a quick round of introductions of the team. We've got some new faces here on the project side, and then we'll run through some introductions on the CAC side as well. So again, for anyone that joined after I started, my name's Corey Pitts. I was the project manager for the phase 2 study. That was the study that completed where we did the alternatives analysis on the 355 project. And I've been overseeing the bus rapid transit projects for the county. I think tonight we don't have Darcy Buckley with us. She had a conflict, but I did see Joanna Conklin. Do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. Joanna Conklin. I am the Bus Rapid Transit Program Manager for Montgomery County. Thanks for coming tonight.
And then we also have Denny Fennerin. Those of you that were part of the project during the last phase may recognize her. She was on the consultant team. She still is with Gannett Fleming, but we've brought her on board to function as the day-to-day project manager on this project. So I'll turn things over to Denny and she'll run through the rest of the introductions.
Hi, everybody. It is nice to see you virtually. I'm going to introduce the consultant design team. They can turn on their cameras and wave if their cameras are connected. First, we have Mike Chamberlain from Stantec.
Hey, Denny.
Hi, Mike. I'm not sure if his camera is on.
Your mic's acting up again, Denny.
Again? How is it now?
Still pretty bad.
Oh my gosh.
While Denny works on that, and just a little bit of comic relief in this virtual world that we've all seemed to be experiencing.
How is it now?
Still the same. Mike Chamberlain is with the Stantec team on the design side. We also have Laurie Adgate from Stantec with us this evening. Randy Napick with IBI Group, who you'll be seeing a little bit more of this evening, and Andrew Pease from IBI Group as well. While Denny works through her technical issues, let's run through and do a quick round of introductions and kind of a refresher for CAC members. I'm just going to kind of read through the list that I have here. It shows up in alphabetical order. If you could, if you want to, turn on your mic, say hi and the group that you represent, that'd be great. The first person I have on the list here is Jerry Garson.
I'm Jerry Garson. I'm the transportation chair of the Montgomery County Civic Federation, which represents about 150,000 homes in Montgomery County.
Great. Glad to have you with us, Jerry. I may mispronounce this, but Abi Milstein.
Hi, I'm with the Lux Manor Citizens Association, and we currently represent about 800 homes in the Lux Manor, Windermere, and Oaks communities.
Great. Glad to have you with us. Amy Ginsberg.
Hi, I'm Amy Ginsberg, and I am with Friends of White Flint.
Glad to have you, Amy. I'm going to guess this is Francine Waters.
Hi, Corey. Darcy, Joanna. Darcy's not there. So I'm Francine Waters. I've been part of this committee since the very first one. I currently am with MDOT.
Great. Joe Gillespie.
Hi, yeah, this is Joe Gillespie. I'm just someone who saw the meeting notice. I thought it sounded interesting and figured I would take a listen in. Live over in North Bethesda.
Great, glad to have you, Joe. Mi-young Park.
Hi, this is Mi-young Park. I am a transportation planner at the city of Gaithersburg.
Glad to have you, Mi-young. Peggy Schwartz.
Hi, Peggy Schwartz, and with the North Bethesda Transportation Management District.
Pete Fosselman. Maybe Pete's having some trouble with his mic. We'll go on. Roger Fox.
Hi, this is Roger Fox. I'm in the Grosvenor Park 2 condos right across from Strathmore and Grosvenor Metro, and I live and work in North Bethesda.
Great, glad to have you, Roger. Zach Trupp.
Hi there, Zach Trupp, Government Affairs Director for the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors.
Great, glad to have you, Zach. And it looks like we've got a number that called in 140-8448.
That's me, Corey.
Oh,
That's
perfect.
Jenny. I'm trying. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you much better now.
Okay, great. We're gonna try it this way.
All right.
Okay, so
Way
are
to
you
be
ready
flexible.
to move? Hey, we're doing what we can in this world, right? All right, so I think we're ready for the next slide now, Randy.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to go over the agenda briefly. Again, the meeting objectives in the agenda. We're going to do a quick project refresh and an update on the project and the project schedule, and then we will do a presentation and a focused discussion on where we are in the project, and then we'll talk a little bit about the next steps. Next slide, Randy. So tonight's objectives. We're going to update all of you on the status of the 355 BRT project as it moves forward into preliminary engineering. We're going to introduce some of the design refinements that we've been working on and are considering as part of this preliminary engineering process. And we want to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback. Next slide. All right, so here's a little refresher. And since all of you have been involved in the project for quite a while now, we'll kind of go through these fast. But if you have questions at any point, like Corey said, feel free to raise your hand and let us know. But the first thing we're going to talk about is the project purpose, the purpose and need. We've talked about that all along. The purpose of the project is to provide a new transit service with greater travel speed and frequency along Maryland 355 between Bethesda and Clarksburg that will help accomplish a whole lot of elements. You can see them on the right side of your screen. I'm not going to read through a lot of them, but we're trying to accomplish a whole lot with this project. So we will move on to the next slide, please. So you all have likely seen some of these flashy new flash buses now along Maryland or US 29. Maryland 355 BRT is part of Montgomery County's vision for over 100 miles of flash BRT in 11 corridors countywide. The US 29 flash BRT began service on October 14th, 2020. So if you've been along US 29, you've seen some of the buses out there. They do look pretty great. So just a refresher for you. The Maryland 355 BRT corridor extends for approximately 22 miles from Bethesda to Clarksburg. It contains a diversity of travel needs, trip purposes, and land uses. From the very south in Bethesda, where it's very urban, all the way up to the north in Clarksburg, where it gets almost rural. Next slide. And we've also talked in the past about our design segments. We have 7 design segments starting in the south at Bethesda with segment 1 and going to the north in Clarksburg to segment 7. For this phase of preliminary engineering, we are focusing on segments 2 through 6, which is from the Grosvenor Metro Rail just north of the Beltway up to segment 6 at Middlebrook Road, just near the Milestone Park and Ride near Middlebrook Road. These are the more challenging sections of the project, whereas segments 1 and 7 are operating in mixed traffic. However, BRT service could run beyond the limits of the dedicated infrastructure. One of the things I do want to point out on this map is in segment 7. If you can see up at the top, we show the 3 different alignments we studied in segment 7. We selected one of those alternatives. Actually, when we get to the next slide, we can talk about that. We go to the next slide. Yes. So the phase 2 planning outcome, we alternative B modified was the alternative that had the majority of support, including from the County Council T&E Committee. However, there were some questions, and we didn't ask the county to move forward with an LPA at this time. We solicited some additional feedback from stakeholders, such as the City of Rockville and Gaithersburg, and consequently, some of our design ideas have evolved in a few locations, and they'll be fleshed out as a part of preliminary engineering. Randy's going to talk a little bit more about those further on in the presentation. The 2 areas we're looking at in detail are in segment 5 and in segment 3 in the Gaithersburg core and in Rockville Town Center. One of the things I wanted to mention is in segment 7 up in Clarksburg, the segment we selected was the segment in Snowden Farm Parkway that runs along sort of the more developed area. Whereas Observation Drive has not yet been fully constructed. There is not an out year for that construction to occur. There is not funding for construction money or even final design. And if you're familiar with 355, as you get further to the north, it does go down to a more 2-lane rural road. And the development has really sort of gone onto the Snowden Farm Parkway side. So that is where we selected the alternative to move more to that side. Next slide, Randy.
There you go.
All right, so project schedule. As I mentioned, we are entering the preliminary engineering phase, which includes the completion of 35% design, a construction schedule, and cost estimate. I mentioned that alternative B modified is the basis of design, with refinements being explored to enhance performance and reduce costs and impacts. In addition, the federal and state environmental process will occur in parallel with this design. Next slide. So just sort of show you where it all falls in the overall process. The box on the left is where we were when we last met. That was during the planning phase and conceptual engineering. You all were involved in that. We are now in preliminary engineering when we really get down into the nitty-gritty of the BRT performance design refinements. We do detailed surveys, we do right-of-way plats, we do our NEPA environmental analysis, and we do a detailed scope, schedule, and cost estimate. The next phase would be the completion of final design, which is not yet funded, and then followed by construction, which is not yet funded. On to the next slide. And here is our project timeline, which, again, you've seen a version of this on our boards at public workshops and at previous CAC meetings. We have updated to show where we are now, which are the blue circles on the right. We are now in the preliminary engineering phase. We've begun the corridor design refinement and survey, and we are moving into more detailed preliminary engineering. All right, next slide. So here is sort of our schedule and some of our key milestones. We are going to submit a 15% roll plan this summer and the adoption of a locally preferred alternative in summer/fall. Our 25% design progress plans will be submitted in winter/spring of 2022. And our 35% preliminary engineering plans, schedule, cost estimate will be submitted in fall of 2022. And the submission of plans for mandatory referral, which is part of the planning review after county approval, will be done in fall/winter of 2022. And then the public review of the environmental process alternative which that is our federal NEPA documentation, which will likely be one of two documents, either what is called a categorical exclusion or an environmental assessment. We are currently working with the Federal Transit Administration to determine what sort of documentation they will require for this project. That's likely to be completed in fall or winter of 2022. Next slide. All right, Randy.
Okay.
For you.
Thanks very much, Jenny. Hi, good evening, everyone. It's really exciting to be with you tonight. Again, my name is Randy Napick. I'm part of the preliminary engineering design team. And I'd like to talk with you about some of the issues we're working through as those design refinements that Denny mentioned as we go forward into the engineering phase of the project. Three things I'll touch on. First is the overall service plan, or the route structure of the BRT service, and some of the changes that are being considered at this point. Then I'll talk about some of the design refinements being undertaken, particularly in segments 3 and 5, as Denny mentioned, but also some other refinements throughout the corridor from top to bottom. And then lastly, talk about a couple of station and alignment alternative focus areas we're looking at 3 important junctions in the middle of the corridor. So I'll take these one by one, and then we'll stop and invite anyone to ask a question or submit a question in the chat, and invite my colleagues here from IBI Group, Andrew Peace, and also Nick Hart was able to join us tonight, and they may wish to contribute to answering any detailed questions. Okay, well, to get into things, let's talk a little bit about the refinement of the service plan. So overall, bus rapid transit is about providing improved speed and reliability in the mixed traffic corridor of 355, and really trying to provide an advantage in speed that makes the service attractive to riders. So we're looking at a variety of strategies, both physical infrastructure as well as technology, to support refining the overall service structure, making it more attractive. But fundamentally, it starts with how the routes are organized. We're also looking at refining the BRT service patterns in terms of the different rider types, or the different kind of travel patterns in the corridor. So because the 355 corridor is 22 miles long and changes quite a bit in character from top to bottom, there are a lot of people who would use the BRT service for different reasons. So for example, in the north, there was a lot of demand for feeder service going into Shady Grove Metro. In the middle of the corridor, we have some important origins and destinations like Montgomery College Rockville, like Rockville Center. And then when you get to the south, where we're running in parallel with the Metro Rail Red Line, it's partially about connecting people between the Metro Rail stations and feeding to those stations as well. So part of what I'll show you is in response to trying to understand those patterns. And really what we're aiming to do is to use the proposed service structures to help inform the decisions made in engineering design about the running way, about the operations at intersections, and the operations at key stations and terminals along the alignment. One other issue we're looking at in preliminary engineering is a shared segment of 355, where the 355 BRT and the proposed Veirs Mill BRT, which is another MCDOT BRT corridor, one of the other 11 corridors that Denny mentioned, they come together just south of the Rockville Metro, so where Veirs Mill Road kind of merges into 355. From the Rockville Metro north to Montgomery College Rockville, you can see in the lower left here of the slide, there's a shared segment of the roadway where buses from both lines will overlap and the stations will be served by both routes. So we're looking from a service planning and a design perspective what the implications are of having these two projects come together. And the county strategy is that the 355 BRT design team, so those of us here on the call, will be taking the lead in the design decisions around the shared segment. So we'll reflect on this and how it affects some of the issues, particularly around Montgomery College Rockville, as we go through the discussion tonight. You may recall from phase 2, this kind of a schematic service plan here shown on the left. This proposed service plan really has 4 route patterns. To start with the north, you've got this kind of orange or gold line that originates in the south at Montgomery College Rockville. And then as it heads north, it kind of splits into two paths. One is headed straight north to Clarksburg towards the Outlet Mall as the terminal. The other turns to the west to the Germantown Transit Center. Then in the middle of the alignment, there is a kind of dark blue or navy route. This one running from the Lake Forest Transit Center near the mall down to the Grosvenor Metro Rail Station. And then lastly, in the south, there's a green pattern from Montgomery College to the Bethesda Southern Terminus, basically near the Bethesda Metro Rail Station. So overlapping patterns, each one kind of focused on a different market segment. And all combining to produce the service so within the 355 BRT corridor. I'll show you some refinements we're looking at here as part of the current work, and this is kind of reflecting a little more on the service patterns, the combination of service with the Veirs Mill BRT and some other potential services in the overall ride-on system. Still proposing 4 route patterns, and they're trying to use the same general colors here. Again, in the north, there's a gold line that consists of 2 patterns, but this time both originating at Shady Grove and heading to the north from there. One thing that's really strong when you look at the forecast modeling data for the corridor is the strong attraction of trips using the service from the north Clarksburg, Germantown area to Shady Grove. In this proposed scenario, there are kind of, again, 2 termini. One is at the Milestone area. You may be familiar with the Milestone Park and Ride in that general vicinity. The other route pattern would continue on to Clarksburg. So what we're trying to accomplish here is as the intensity of the ridership starts to lessen as you go to the north towards Clarksburg, we would not have every single trip go all the way up to Clarksburg, some way kind of turn around in the routes at Milestone. And this would generally better balance where we're putting the capacity of the service to where the ridership is. We still have a kind of blue or navy route in the middle of the alignment. So this one is showing from Lake Forest Transit Center to the kind of Grosvenor White Flint metro area. Final terminus to be determined based on engineering factors of how we can turn the buses around and layover, but generally to the mid Metro Railroad line corridor. And then lastly, we have the green pattern, this one going from Montgomery College Rockville down to the southern terminus in Bethesda. You'll notice here on the diagram also the red line Metro Rail is shown here, so you can see that there's still a number of connections at the Metro Rail red line stations along the full length of the corridor. You also see that there are some solid lines within these route patterns, and then there's some kind of hollow lines or dashed lines. The solid lines are those areas where we have the heavy kind of dedicated BRT infrastructure, that core infrastructure in segments 2 through 6 that Danny mentioned earlier. As you get into the kind of hollowed area where it's just the outline of the route, that's where we'd be in mixed traffic. And the dashed line to the far north towards Clarksburg and the Outlet Mall is really representing that not all trips would proceed all the way to Clarksburg. The probably major change from the earlier proposed service plan is that in this scenario, we're proposing not to run the pattern on the gold line to Germantown Transit Center. Looking at this more closely, it turns out to be the lowest performing route of all the BRT lines, and we think that concentrating the service where the ridership is stronger would be a way to make the project more effective. And there's, of course, another number of other ride-on service options serving the Germantown Transit Center. So maybe I'll just take a breather here. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on the service plan before we start to talk about the infrastructure? I see a hand raised from Jerry.
Yeah. I'm trying to start my video, but you can hear me though.
Yes, sir.
My question is basically, WMATA has proposed having once every half-hour train service to Shady Grove once all this extra federal funding because of COVID-19 occurs, and basically shutting down the Grosvenor station. At the moment, the Grosvenor station is operating at 5% of capacity. Because I had this meeting last week, my wife talked me into going up to Clarksburg, And are you aware that about 30 to 40% of the stores in Clarksburg are actually shut down and shuttered for good? So basically, I don't even know that mall will be viable by the time this happens. And if the WMATA is going to only have service every half hour in the northern parts, are we bearing this in mind with all the design? I mean, I don't think rail is going to come back particularly. And right now we're seeing in the parking lot at Shady Grove, on average in February, only 168 cars a day are parking there. 2 years ago, we had 3,243 cars a day. The whole people are basically scared of the subway, and a lot of your ridership you plan for basically commuters. Everyone in most people's opinion is that the commuting is going to be like 1 or 2 days a week. Probably the only commuting times will be anyone commuting into Washington is basically Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We also see on looking at the 29 Flash bus that the various Z routes are only at 18% of their prior capacity. Yes, the Flash service on 29 is getting 1,600 riders a day because it's free and more people are willing to walk or take the free bus rather than pay for the WMATA buses on Route 29. But we have to really think, is this even a viable plan in light of all of WMATA's proposed shutdowns?
Yeah, you make a lot of really valid observations, Jerry, and Corey or Joanna or others may want to weigh in from the county. I can tell you from the projects team, the analysis here behind the service recommendations are based on 2040 forecasts. I think, as you rightly point out, there have been a lot of travel changes during the COVID era, and I think we're all anticipating some of those changes, particularly with the 5-day commuting, will be changes that could have a lot of permanence and really influence how we all travel, and of course then what